Hi students, this week we're talking about ancient Greece, and so we're moving further west and looking at some of our earliest European civilizations. As we've seen with some of the other civilizations we've looked at so far, the geography of ancient Greece plays a role in shaping this culture. When we look at the geography of Greece, we see that it doesn't have the great rivers that we associate with ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, but instead it's a mountainous land that's divided up into small enclaves, which become cities on the coast, and the mountains kind of break up the land in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of access to the sea. And this geography is going to encourage the Greeks to look to the sea, that a lot of their life is going to be built around the sea, but it's also going to encourage a sense of independence. The way that each of these cities, each of these areas is separated from the others geographically will encourage a sense of independence among the Greeks. And one of the great Greek contributions to the culture of Western civilization is the idea of freedom and independence, as we'll see when we move forward. We're going to look at the very earliest Greek civilizations. These are the ancient Minoans on the island of Crete and the ancient Mycenaeans on the mainland. With both of these civilizations, we see a propensity and attraction to carrying out trade across the Mediterranean. This becomes an important part of the livelihood of these peoples. Moving on from the ancient Mycenaeans. So the Minoans are very successful in Crete. They're one of the very first Greek civilization that we have a record of. They're kind of surpassed by the Mycenaeans. The Mycenaean civilization falls around 1100 BC, and then the Greek civilization enters a period that's called a Dark Age, where we don't have a lot of records. We have a new group of people that have moved in to the area that don't provide us with a whole lot of written evidence about what was going on in Greece at this time. And that's going to remain the case for about another 400 years, 300, 400 years until about 800, 750 BC. And it's at that point that we start to see the Greek civilization re-emerging. And the civilization that reemerges is built around these city-states. The two most famous that we look at in the most detail are Athens, which was a democracy. It was a very chaotic form of democracy, but it is one of the earliest democracies. And Sparta, which was more focused on military achievement, and was governed under an oligarchy. That means kind of the rule of the few, or the rule of the wealthy, typically. So Sparta it's kind of a complex government structure, but it's part oligarchy, kind of ruled by the nobles or ruled by the wealthy, and part monarchy, because there are also two kings, but the kings are overseen by another body. So Sparta's kind of a cross between those forms of government. There's a focus on military valor and defending themselves against their local enemies and expanding their territory. Athens is a democracy with a great focus on trade, located much closer to the sea. And there are lots of other Greek city-states that are growing up at this time. And as the Greek population expands, the Greeks they continue to trade in the Mediterranean, and they start to establish colonies around the Mediterranean. Eventually, these colonies are going to come into contact with the Persian Empire. And the mighty Persian Empire once again demands that these cities acknowledge their sovereignty. And while we have seen that many peoples across the Middle East were quite happy to be ruled by the Persians, they saw the Persians as benevolent rulers, the Greeks maintain this culture of freedom and independence. And so they resist, and this leads, to cut a long story short, this leads to the beginning of the Persian Wars, when the Persian Emperor Darius invades the mainland of Greece. And here, the Greeks are successful in beating back the Persians at the Battle of Marathon. Despite being outnumbered, they surprise the Persians. They're able to defeat them. This doesn't change the fact that the Persian Empire is still the most powerful force in the ancient world at the time. And the next Persian emperor Xerxes, launches a much more serious invasion in the year 481. And this invasion is opposed basically only at first by the Spartans. And the Spartans make this very famous stand at the Battle of Thermopylae. They fight in the valley. There are only a few hundred of them, and in the end, they all die. But in doing so, they hold up the Persian advance, and more importantly, and this is what's significant about the Battle of Thermopylae that lots of people miss, is that they serve as a source of inspiration for the other Greek cities. The other Greek cities are inspired to rise up and to resist the Persians. And this enables the Greeks to win two major victories, one at sea, where they have an advantage over the Persians because of their familiarity with sailing and trading. This is at the Battle of Salamis, and another at the Battle of Plataea in 479. And this brings to an end Persian attempts to conquer the Greeks. Persians remain the most powerful empire in the ancient world, but the Greeks have ensured their independence. And what follows is known as the Golden Age of Greek civilization. It's a period where we see great Greek achievements that are focused on expressing the order that the Greeks see in the universe. So for the Greeks, the great Greek contributions to Western civilization are first, this idea of freedom, the importance of maintaining freedom, and second, the idea that the universe is rational and ordered, and it's possible for human beings to understand the order in the universe. And we see this in the way the Greeks pursue philosophy, trying to find the most rational way for human beings to live together. And there's a great focus on community and living together. We see this in the way the Greeks pursue astronomy, recognizing the patterns in the sky, able to predict the movements of the stars and the planets. We see this in Greek achievements in mathematics and music, the order that they find in these two subjects. And finally, and this is perhaps another way that the Greeks are often remembered by many people today, we see it in the Greeks' construction of art and architecture. And so if you're looking at the PowerPoint for this week, you'll see that the final slide ends with images of the Parthenon and other Greek sculptures. And all of these structures are designed to show and emphasize proportionality and order, that there is an order to the universe, and that it's possible for human beings to understand that order and to, in many ways, partake of that order. That's all for this week. I'll see you in a week's time.